Hey friends, welcome to another edition of the Lead More podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. And of course, the Lead More podcast exists because I believe the world needs more leaders, and I want you to be one of them. You already are one of them. And so whether you are passed the baton and told to lead, or you just think you're ready to step out and do it yourself, I believe you should, and we need you. So I'm here to help. And in this episode, or in this podcast, we talk to leaders to learn their tips, their tactics, their strategies, their stories of what it was like for them to become a leader, as well as the frameworks and models that you can take from them and apply if you're an entrepreneur, a CEO, a nonprofit executive, potentially even a coach in whatever team or group of people who are following you. So in this episode, I want to do something we have never done before. We are 120 plus episodes into the Lead More podcast, and I've never done this. We're calling it a mailbag edition, essentially. This is the first one, so I'm more so curating or gathering questions, but I want to start mixing in a little bit of a mailbag where I can answer. These are real questions from real leaders that I've gotten. In fact, I got all 4 of these in the last week, whether it was through my one-on-one coaching, my group coaching program, or I also led a workshop this week inside a company. So all 4 of these questions came from real entrepreneurs, and I'm here to answer them so that maybe you might have the same question, and maybe you've wondered the same thing before. So this isn't necessarily a themed episode. It's a solo episode of me answering real leader questions. Here's how I answered them to these folks, and maybe you'll find it valuable. One thing to note, some information is redacted. The name and the companies, of course, aren't being shared for privacy and confidentiality, but the question and the integrity of the answer still applies. So let's get right to it. Question number 1 is about partnerships. And the question said, I'm looking at adding a business partner to my current solopreneur business. You've had lots of different partnerships. How do you recommend I structure it? In a little more context, they had asked, should it be 50-50? They expressed they're not a big 50-50 person, 51-49, revenue share, profit sharing, all these different answers, right? And we backed up, and the first thing that I shared is, what do you want? And of course, what does your partner want? As you're approaching a potential co-founder, business partner, investor, get a sense of what they actually want, right? I always say you should date your partner. Not literally, but just figuratively. Get to know them, right? Hang out with them, hang out with their family, take them out to dinner, grab a beer. Like, what do they want? Why are they going into business with you? I've done all sorts of partnerships. I've done 50-50 with a family member. Don't really recommend that again. Everything is fine. We're good, but just family business is tough. I've done 2/3, 1/3. I've done 80-20. And I've done 100-0, but with like profit sharing and incentives and milestones and bonuses. So I think this is how I think of hiring too, but have people rank what matters to them and do it yourself, right? If you're a partnership, you need to be able to have these two-way conversations. They should know why you want to do this business and why you're picking them, and of course, vice versa. So lots of different ways to structure, but I think you have to get the incentive right first. Can you do 50-50? Sure. Can you do 51-49? Can you do family? Yes, you can do all of them. Some are harder than others. The one thing I will say, though, is I do highly recommend having a partner. I think going alone is tough. I coach a lot of solopreneurs, and lots of times my recommendations are to grow. It doesn't have to necessarily be a partner right away, but an employee or someone who could become a high stakes employee, maybe a partner, maybe they get some sort of commission or revenue sharing or profit sharing, right? Lots of different ways to do it. Don't overthink it, but get to the heart of what they want. Find out what matters most to them. Question number 2. I'm calling this internal versus external. Here's the question. We know we need to hire someone in our small team, but we're trying to decide whether we should promote a person internally to the role or post the job and look externally. We're not sure if the person we already have is the right person. Great question. I think a lot of leaders go through this challenge, especially if you're a small growing team. Certainly want to support and promote and grow the people internally, but are they the right person? And when is it a growth role? When is it an external thing? My answer to this person was create a job description. And I know people hate thinking about a job description, but even just a bullet point list of what this role will do, not the person, but what the role will do, so that you can look at this objectively, look at this role and decide, is Megan, we'll say, the right person, the person we already have internally? Or do we need to go out and find this person? Can she grow into this role, or is it just not a fit right now? So one of the things we'll do with my founders in coaching is to draw an org chart. And I always recommend drawing the org chart without the names. Create one today, like present day, that org chart with who's on the bus right now can have names. Lay out the bus, lay out the seats and the names next to the bus and the job titles. But if you're doing a 1, 3, 5 years in the future, draw that org chart without names, just roles. Even yourself, right? CEO, chief marketing officer, graphic designer, copywriter, salesperson, whatever. Like, to draw the roles and then have the job descriptions, or at least the bullet points of responsibilities tied to those roles without the names. It takes the emotion out of it. We're not just assuming that someone will be here 3 years from now, or assuming that it'll be their job for 5 years to come. That'll take the emotion out of it. Then when you have a non-named job description, you can sit down with that person potentially and say, this is what we think the role is going to require. Is it something you want? And between you and potentially your partner, for the first question, examine that person. Do they have what it takes now? Can they grow into that? Or is it maybe just not the right fit? One thing on external, if you decide to hire externally, I hear a lot of people, I'll have people DM me and say, hey, I'm looking to hire somebody, especially in the creative space here in South Dakota. I'm looking to hire a designer, looking to hire a writer. Do you know of anybody? And I'll usually push back and say, why don't you post it, right? If you think your compensation is competitive, if you think you have a great culture and you want to showcase that, post the job, see what's out there, right? I think people apply for jobs when they sometimes least expect it, right? Maybe you don't always want the person who's applying for every job looking all the time. Instead, you want to see something where it comes by someone's radar, or someone sends it to a friend saying, you would be perfect for this. So I would encourage you to consider posting the job instead of just going through the network, social media, the network, friends and family route. Number 3, leads not responding. Here's the question. I hate bugging leads after we've spoken on like a sales call or discovery call. I don't want to be annoying, but how many times should I follow up? This was one that we just talked about in my No More Solo group coaching plan. And I love this because I always like to say the fortune is in the follow-up. Most people give up after 2, sometimes just 2, but for sure like 3 times. I'm going to keep reaching out until you tell me no or not yet. Now, I'm going to do it kindly, strategically. I might say, hey, I saw this article, it made me think of you. Or I listened to this podcast about your industry. It's really growing. I thought you might want to take a listen. I'm going to find ways to get back in your orbit, in your inbox, to have a coffee where I can kindly and politely get in front of you to remind you about the project or the proposal or the contract we talked about. So I'm not going to create just an automated every 7 days checking in type of want to follow up. That's this, nails on a chalkboard word. But the fortune is in the follow up. And when it comes to sales, like what I always like to say is the yeses will make you money. The no's will save you money. It's the maybes you got to watch out for. You don't want to have a pipeline of 50 maybes. You're like, well, if all of these hit, it's going to be a great quarter. But let's be honest, how many of those will actually hit, right? Move the leads along, move the prospects, get a yes, which is what we want, or get a no. But then even when you get a no, figure out why. Maybe it's just not right now. Maybe it's the next quarter. Maybe it's the next year. Or my secret, I love this, the magical question, what would have to be true for you to hire me as your coach? What would have to be true for you to hire Lemonly as your design agency? If they're not giving you the answer, just ask them straight up, what would have to be true? Doesn't mean they're committing or saying yes, but they might then tell you it's a budget thing. It's a talent thing. It's a portfolio thing. It's just a not right now thing. Number 4, document, don't create. So the question was, this was at a sort of entrepreneurial event that I was speaking in. The person I always talk about, you've heard me say this, when it comes to social media and content, document, don't create. It doesn't have to be perfectly crafted with the right hashtag and the perfect filter and the amazing angle when it comes to marketing yourself or your business. Just document the journey. Here's a picture of me, my first day of work. Here's a picture of me starting a business. But she said, okay, so document, don't create. But how real and honest should I be? I do want to be seen as the expert, but how authentic and vulnerable should I get? Really good question. And I thought that was a really smart question. I encourage you to be as authentic and vulnerable as you are willing to be. people, I always say, like even if you're in the B2B world, behind every B is still a C. People buy from other people, not logos buying from logos. But yes, if you're a coach, if you're a thought leader, consultant, an expert, a service provider, you need to show your expertise. Don't fake it, just show it. Like document that journey, show yourself making things, show yourself creating, talk about the projects that you've worked with, sprinkle in proof. I call this, proof is social proof, testimonials, quotes from your successful, happy clients. Let other people talk about you, let other people brag about you. And then you just talk about, the things you know best, your expertise. So I think I'm okay with a little bit of filter. If you remember that like viral LinkedIn post of the startup CEO on LinkedIn, he's like crying and he has this post of like, I just had to fire somebody. It was the worst moment. Like, don't do that. That's so cringe. It's like forced vulnerability where guess what? Somebody on the other side of that LinkedIn post actually got fired and lost their job. I don't need a crying picture of you trying to act sympathetic and empathetic, right? You can be real. You can even be a little raw, but you can still establish your expertise while letting people in on the journey. I think when I say document, that's what I mean is the journey is the content. I posted a video recently that showed me creating video content in 2009 with a flip cam, low quality in my apartment. And it was terrible, like not very good, pretty bad actually. And guess what? I did it again in 10 and 11 and 12. And so over 15 years, you could slowly see the video get better in quality, me getting better and more articulate in what I say and how I say it. And, all of it just continues to get better and better. And while I still think I have a long ways to go, I think my content's great, but I'll see other creators like, gosh, I got to level up. The point is it's the journey, right? Looking back to see where I've come makes me excited about where I'm going and makes me recognize and appreciate how far I've gone, right? So the journey is the content. The challenge, of course, maybe the problem or the hard part is this takes time, right? You post today, show up, you post tomorrow, post the next day. Will your business transform overnight and you'll get all the clients in the world? Likely not, but you got to keep showing up. And because not only is that where the repetition and the practice and how you get better, but like the algorithms need to know who you are and what you stand for. At least on social media, they need to hear you continually target your client, post content and showing up. Creating a podcast, no differently. 100+ episodes. I got some great ones. I got some doozies. Just keep trying to get better. And I keep tinkering, right? Speaking of this episode, never done a mailbag episode. Why not try it? We'll see if you guys like it. These are all real questions from real entrepreneurs that I have answered before. And I thought maybe these answers might be helpful to other people. All right, that was our first ever mailbag edition of the Lead More podcast. I hope you like that, and I hope everyone could find something that they took from that. These are, again, are real questions from real entrepreneurs and with real answers from me. So as always, we have the Lead More podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We're on YouTube as well. You can watch this in video format. You can listen in audio format. And if you liked this, go ahead and email John, John, at johntmeyer.com if you have a question. I don't think we'll do these too often, but if we start to gather a few questions in the mailbag, I'll lay them down and we'll answer all of them together. So John at johntmeyer.com, email me if you have a question, something you want to know. As always, leaders, take care and be well.